It's a cold case from 1985. It's Christine Gallegos.
Found shot and stabbed to death in a Salt Lake City alleyway.
I was so young when it happened. I was 12 years old, and it just turned everything in everybody's world upside down.
Why is it 35 years later, we're still looking at this?
It was my daughter. They had no right.
I'm Aubrey Holdaway, and this is Unsolved, Utah. At 3:50 a.m. on May 16, 1985, the body of a young woman was found in a gutter outside 1384 Jefferson Street in Salt Lake City. She had been shot and stabbed, and Salt Lake police say that when detectives arrived at the scene, it was obvious to them that the victim had struggled with her killer. The previous night, 18-year-old Christine Gallegos left her home in West Valley to go out with friends. Her mother, Leah, cautioned her to stay home that night. She had a bad feeling that she couldn't quite place, but Christine shrugged it off. She wanted to go out, and nothing bad can happen to you when you're 18. Christine's younger brother, Steve, who was 12 at the time, recounted the events of that night to Mike Morford for an episode of Murder in My Family.
My mom was trying to get her to not leave that night, saying, hey, I don't have a good feeling, stay home. My mom's always been that kind of person. She just had that gut feeling. Mothers know.
When Leah Gallegos walked into her Salt Lake City workplace the morning of May 16th, her coworkers were talking about the body of an unidentified girl who'd been found near the old Dirks field. Her coworkers relayed what they'd heard from the news, and Leah immediately recognized the description of what the girl was wearing. It was the same outfit Christine had left the house in the previous night.
So May 16th, for whatever reason, I was still home. Mom called the house, and said, hey, go check and see if your sister's downstairs. So, yeah, she's down there. She's asleep. She says, well, you need to go check. Come back to the phone and tell her, no, she's not home. And all I knew then is my mother had said something to the effect of, well, they found a girl's body, and it sounds like it could be her.
As Steve anxiously awaited any additional news, a reporter came by the house asking for Leah. Steve said she wasn't home and asked if the body found was his sister. The reporter wouldn't answer and told Steve he would need to ask his mom. Meanwhile, Leah was calling the Salt Lake City Police Department to give them identifying information about Christine, desperately hoping that would rule out her daughter. She ended up being hung up on, so she walked the short distance from her work to the police station. It was there that it was confirmed that the murdered girl was Christine.
When it was confirmed that it was my sister, she fell apart.
Although it was reported that Christine had been stabbed, Salt Lake City police did not release any additional details about the injuries or any weapons. However, they were able to collect a broken-off knife handle from the scene. Greg Chase, who was part of the Salt Lake City Homicide Task Force created in 1968, described this evidence to ABC4.
We got photos of the knife blade that was broken off right at the handle.
Because Christine was both shot and stabbed, police believed that there were likely two perpetrators. She had 3 stab wounds, one of which clipped her lungs, but surprisingly none of them were fatal. The gunshot wound was on the left side of her neck, and she had been shot at close proximity. Robbery gone wrong was ruled out pretty quickly, as she was still wearing several pieces of jewelry when her body was found. As far as possible suspects went, there wasn't anyone with a clear motive. To many of the people in her life, including her family, Christine was a bit wild, but in the same way that many 18-year-olds are. She liked to go out and party with her friends, but had never been in any real trouble.
Of course, that was the 80s, and so she was very outgoing. She liked to, party, and she liked rock and roll and hanging out with her friends and, going to the mall and going down to I guess you call it the main drag at the time, and hanging out with everybody that was down on State Street is what it was here. And just kind of like hanging, she liked that scene.
The classic place to start in any homicide investigation is to look at the victim's current or former significant others. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, in 2021, data reported by law enforcement agencies indicated that 76% of female homicides were committed by someone known to the victim, and 34% by an intimate partner. Christine had a boyfriend at the time who was living with her and her family, but he was ruled out quickly.
She had a boyfriend, fiance that was living with us at the time, and he kind of turned into like a big brother of mine. If I remember, he was I believe he was at the house asleep when I went down and looked, and he was asleep alone in the bedroom. So, and that was the bad part, is that, I remember he took it very hard.
Eventually, police's investigation led them to believe that Christine may have been some sort of escort or exotic dancer. They felt that this risky behavior may have put Christine in contact with dangerous types of people.
It's come out after the fact, and I didn't find out until probably 10 years ago that she was actually working as an escort, not like dancing at parties and stuff, her and some friends of hers.
But even with that clue, they weren't able to come up with a strong suspect. There were several murders in the surrounding years, and so the city formed the Unsolved Homicide Task Force in July of 1986 in an attempt to get a handle on the growing list of unsolved homicides. They were eventually able to link Christine's case with the murders of 2 other young women. On April 25, 1986, 20-year-old Carla Maxwell was shot and killed during a robbery while working her regular shift at a 7-Eleven in Layton. A little over 2 weeks later, on May 12th, almost a year to the day after the murder of Christine Gallegos, 25-year-old Lisa Strong was shot and killed as she was walking home from work near Kensington Avenue and 800 East in Salt Lake City. Police stated that there were reasons to think the murders might be connected, but they didn't elaborate on why until much later. But behind the scenes, police had determined through a ballistics report that the gun used in Christine's murder was the same gun used to kill both Lisa and Carla. Some of the same characters further tied the 3 girls together. Greg Chase was a member of the crime analysis unit assigned to the Unsolved Homicide Task Force. As he investigated the murders of the 3 women, the same few names kept popping up.
And I would hang out with some of her friends, who were, of course, quite a bit older, but I would end up at warehouse parties down on the main drag down in downtown Salt Lake City. There were little clubs where the rock and roll crowd would gather. Those were the same places and people that she was running with before she was murdered. And I'm starting to question if it could have been somebody that was in our group of people. There was a store clerk that was murdered in Layton, and they matched the gun to the same gun that had killed Chris. The strange thing is that clerk was killed just a few minutes after I left that 7-Eleven, and we'd gone down there, bought some drinks, bought some snacks, went back, and within just a few minutes we could hear sirens, and it found out the next morning that clerk had been shot with the same gun that had killed my sister.
Strangely, there began to be some conflict within law enforcement regarding the investigation. Chase, along with his boss John Ike and Detective Frank Hatton Ward, brought up leads to Salt Lake Police but were allegedly ignored. Chase told Sidney Gonzalez that at one point his chart documenting how various chosen few gang members and associates were connected to the murders was confiscated. Chase never saw the chart again, but he said he was able to place multiple gang members near or at locations where the murders took place.
All they did was try to disprove. They didn't go out to try and prove or follow the facts. All they did was try to discredit and disprove anything the 3 of us had come up with.
At first it was said there was a street gang involved, but I don't know anything about that or who they were.
While Chase, Ike, and Hatton Ward were following their gang theory, several detectives from the Salt Lake City Police Homicide Unit, including Jim Bell, started investigating Paul Ezra Rhodes as a suspect. Rhodes was serving time in Idaho for multiple murders. Interest in the case has died down until 1994 when civil rights attorney Ross Rocky Anderson, who would go on to become mayor of Salt Lake City, pushed local authorities to solve the murders in the late 90s. His attention to the cases caused then District Attorney David Yoakum to call a special grand jury to examine the murder of Strong, which resulted in the conviction of a various chosen few gang member Forrest Whittle. After being elected mayor, Anderson also started a cold case team to investigate the other killings. He told the Daily Universe, quote, "These cases were mishandled because of sloppiness, laziness, incompetence, dishonesty, and the fact that certain detectives went public with their baseless theory. The victims, families, and friends, and our community deserve justice. They deserve answers, and the perpetrators deserve to be held to account." Unquote. It's been 24 years since Whittle was convicted of Strong's murder and 35 since Christine Gallegos was killed. Now, Jason Jensen, founder and investigator for the Utah Cold Case Coalition, is working on the case to bring closure to the families. He's investigating individuals and names that Chase originally brought up to detectives.
The case is still there, and any information that they have could be helpful, or if they remember anything, I don't even care what it is, just if they think it's insignificant, still, let's look at it and see, because anything can be helpful at this point.